Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into this week's editions of my starts and sits for week 12 of the football season. You guys are getting this a little earlier, as I mentioned in the waiver wire video last night, with it being Thanksgiving tomorrow, me getting off work early today. I decided this afternoon I was just going to come home and knock this out, post it on my channels so you guys can get all this content, because there are a couple names I'll be playing tomorrow that I am going to bring up throughout this episode. As always, you're getting my top two starts and sits for the quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end position. You guys know the drill. I'm starting with the quarterbacks. So my top start of the week is going to be Geno Smith. The Seahawks are going to face the Raiders this weekend, and the Raiders defense obviously has one of the worst units in the league. They give up a lot of yards through the air. As far as fantasy, they're giving up 21 points per game to quarterbacks this season. That would be the third most in the NFL. You got DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and just the way Geno's playing, and the fact that he has a rushing floor. So if you were thinking about streaming Geno this week, this is the week to do it. My other top start, this might be a layup, but I decided to go with Justin Herbert against the Cardinals. I know he finally bounced back with his best game in quite some time last week against the Chiefs, and as long as he continues this week against this weak Cardinals defense, I'm probably not going to tell you guys to start him going forward. He's going to be an obvious play. But with that being said, the Cardinals are allowing 19.6 points per game to quarterbacks this year. That's the fourth most in the NFL. I mean, shoot, Jimmy Garoppolo threw 3 touchdowns against this defense. You know the last time that Jimmy Garoppolo threw 3 touchdowns in a game? That was in 2020. What do you think Justin Herbert's going to do? He's got Keenan Allen in the back in the lineup. We'll have to see if Mike Williams can play, but Joshua Palmer obviously really came on in year 2 for that offense. So I think Justin's going to continue that hot streak and get this Chargers team back on track as they try to make that push for the playoffs. My top sits. A guy that was once a fantasy darling, a guy that you could trust, but now you have to really pick the matchups with Rodgers, even with the passing attack coming on. But yeah, Aaron Rodgers against the Eagles. The Eagles, obviously, they have one of the best defenses in the league. They bolstered their defensive front with Ndamukong Suh and Linval Joseph. They got a great edge rush, and they got a nice pair of cornerbacks in James Bradbury and Darius Slay. So it's going to be a tough out matchup for Rodgers to overcome if you're thinking about playing him in your lineups this week. I wouldn't do it. The Eagles are only giving up 9.5 points per game to quarterbacks this year. That's the fewest across the NFL. So don't get attracted to that name when you put your lineups together this week. My other sit. Now, this is, if anybody has not heard, if you're a first time listener, you may see some names, including who I'm about to talk about. Tua Tagovailoa against the Texans, where I don't think you're going to sit Tua or some of these names I'll talk about in redraft or dynasty leagues. But if you play daily fantasy football, he would be a name I would look to avoid in your lineups this week. The Texans, surprisingly for having being the worst team in the NFL, they only give up 12.4 points per game to quarterbacks so far. That's the third fewest amount in the NFL. And you guys that have been long time listening to me for throughout the season, you guys heard me say this before. It's pretty simple because I'm about to talk about the running backs, right? You can run the ball against the Texans, and because what happens is what happens with these fantasy quarterbacks against the Texans defense is if they don't get you two touchdowns by the time they create such a significant lead, your quarterback gets game scripted out of it, and they just hand the ball off. Like, for example, I mean, luckily I did win my matchup, but I actually in the league I happened to have Tua in. He was on a bye last week, and my last option I decided to just throw a dart and see if Taylor Heineke could overcome this. And Taylor only got the 1 touchdown for me, very minimal points, but at least I won that game. But that's what I'm saying is like you would think quarterbacks are getting a lot of points against the Texans. It's just not the case because you can run the ball, you create such a big lead, and you just keep on running the ball because they can't stop it. So with that being said, my top starts of the week for quarterbacks, Geno Smith against the Raiders and Justin Herbert against the Cardinals. My top sits, Aaron Rodgers against the Eagles and Tua Tagovailoa against the Texans. Moving into my top running back starts and sits, yeah, just kind of feeding off what I just said. You can run the ball against this Texans defense, so that makes easily Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson Jr.'s automatic starts for you this week. Just going to go ahead and wrap this up because I already went into a big spiel about the Texans Texans defense. But as far as fantasy, the numbers, they're giving up 26.8 points per game. That's the most allowed in the NFL, and I can just really see the Dolphins going up big early on Houston, and they're just going to be running the ball as much as they can in the second half of the game. My other starts is going to be Leonard Fournette and Rachaad White against the Browns. Now, I do want to put a caveat on there. Right before I hopped on to record, Todd Bowles said that Leonard Fournette is dealing with a hip pointer and it's very sore. But if he's able to play, he will. So that is something to monitor going forward. And if Fournette does get ruled out, then man, Rachaad White's value completely skyrockets this week, and you're going to want to put him in your lineup. The Bucs, they're facing the Browns this week. The Browns' rushing defense is terrible. We saw what Devin Singletary and James Cook did to them this past Sunday. And then when you look at the numbers as far as terms of fantasy, they're giving up 24.9 points per game. That is the second most in the NFL. So yeah, man, Rachaad White's a significant play. You may want to really watch the Fournette injury. Maybe pay attention where if he's going to be active, try to see if there's any game day reports, if he'll be limited in his snaps or not. But if they say he's a full goal, I still think Fournette would be a good play because I think these guys are going to start splitting the reps going forward for the remaining of the season. My sits, just like I was talking about with Tua Tagovailoa, these two names I'm about to talk to are temper your expectation plays. You're going to play these two names. There's no way you're going to sit them in your redraft or dynasty leagues. But these are names that I would be looking to avoid this week in my DFS lineups. So with that being said, Alvin Kamara against the 49ers. That 49ers defense is so good underneath DeMeco Ryans. They have playmakers on all three levels of the ball. And you know what they're going to do is they're going to take away Kamara and they're going to try to force Andy Dalton to beat them. And when you look at the fantasy football numbers, the 49ers are only giving up 12.1 points per game to running backs this year. That's the fewest amount in the NFL. So yeah, you're going to have to temper your expectations with Kamara in your lineup this week, but if you put together your DraftKings, FanDuel, underdog lineups, I would have looked to avoid Kamara. The same thing with Dalvin Cook. He's playing tomorrow night on Thanksgiving evening against those New England Patriots. As I say all the time with Bill Belichick, he just has a knack for having his defense to be able to take away the run. And when you look at the fantasy numbers, they're only giving up 12.4 points per game to running backs this year. That's the second fewest in the NFL. So this is where a game that Cook's probably going to get one of his floor outcomes for you, if not lower than that. But if he is able to overcome that and get you a huge point differential, then that would be great for you. But again, just temper your expectations if he doesn't have the greatest matchup in the world, or greatest outcome or performance, however you want me to say that, in the world. So with that being said, let me just move on. My top starts for the week, Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson Jr. Against the Texans, and then Leonard Fournette, watch that injury going forward, but definitely Rachaad White against the Browns. And then my sits, Alvin Kamara against the Niners and Dalvin Cook against the Patriots. Moving into my top wide receiver starts and sits. As you can see, my starts, I'm talking about a trio of guys. But yeah, starting with the Indianapolis trio of wide receivers, Michael Pittman Jr., Paris Campbell, and Alec Pierce against the Steelers. I think Michael Pittman Jr. and Paris Campbell are guys you can put in your lineup for this Monday Night Football matchup. And I do apologize if you hear my dog Titan that's laying down right next to me decided he's going to go ahead and sneeze in the middle of my video. But let's get back on track. Now, Alec Pierce, his numbers obviously haven't been there for you. Obviously, when Matt Ryan was benched, everybody's numbers were down. He hasn't really got a huge number with Ryan returning, but I think it's notable that this past weekend he did out-snap Paris Campbell. So I think there's going to be eventually he's going to get back and start seeing those targets that he was seeing with Ryan before Ryan did get benched. Alec Pierce would be, as far as redraft and dynasty, more of a guy, more of like a 12-14 team league this week. I think you may have a better option than Alec Pierce in a 10-team league, but he might be a sneaky cheap play as far as in DFS. Again, they're going against the Steelers defense where they're better up front, but you can throw the ball against them, and they're giving up a lot of points in fantasy this year. They're giving up 29.3 points per game. That's the most in the NFL that's allowed, so there's plenty of points to go around between these three wide receivers, and I can see all three. Michael Pittman Jr. is due for a big game where he gets like he gets like a couple touchdowns, I feel like, and I really think I have a sneaky feeling Pierce is going to have a good night against Pittsburgh on Monday. Moving into my other top starts, Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, and Jahan Dotson against the Falcons. And you know how I view this trio of wide receivers is the same way how I just talked about with the Colts, right? Like Terry McLaurin definitely playing him, Curtis Samuel definitely playing him. You may wonder about Jahan Dotson. You know, he's kind of not. He hasn't been getting the production he did prior to his injury, but I think he's probably getting worked his way back. He should be a lot healthier right now. So I think he could be a sneaky play in a 12-14 team league, and definitely a sneaky cheap play in DFS this week. They're going against the Atlanta Falcons, who have one of the worst defenses in the league, in my opinion, and they're giving up 27.2 points per game this year to wide receivers. That's the second most in the NFL, so plenty of points to go around. And so I think those guys are going to have a good game as well on Sunday. Now, my sits, going back to this Monday night matchup between the Steelers and Colts, Deontay Johnson and George Pickens against the Colts. The Colts, they're only allowing 15 points per game to wide receivers this year. That's the fewest amount in the NFL. It definitely helps that when you do have, and I do apologize, Titan decided he's going to make an appearance and he's going to be drinking some water and he might be eating some of his food, so I do apologize, guys, if you are hearing that in the background. With that being said, getting back on track, you know, we got Stephon Gilmore. You know, Pickens and Deontay Johnson are going to get covered by Gilmore throughout the matchup. Kenny Moore's in the slot. And then, like I was talking about with the streaming the Colts defense last night, I think this Colts defensive front's going to be able to get after Kenny Pickett. So I don't see them, like, overcoming this bad fantasy matchup for you this week. My other sits, DJ Moore and Terrace Marshall Jr. against the Broncos. The Broncos, obviously, I've said this every week, they have one of the best defenses in the league. And then when you look at the Panthers, they just named Sam Darnold the starting quarterback again. So I don't trust that whatsoever. So there's no way I would want to play them in that type of, like, even if like the matchup was decent, I would not want to play these guys with Sam Darnold back as the quarterback. And when you look at the fantasy production, the Broncos are giving up 15.5 points per game to wide receivers. That is the second fewest across the NFL. So again, my top starts, there's going to be Michael Pittman Jr. and Paris Campbell and Alec Pierce against the Steelers, and then Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, and Jahan Dotson against the Falcons. And then my sits, Deontay Johnson, George Pickens against the Colts, and then DJ Moore and Terrace Marshall Jr. against the Broncos. Moving into my top starts and sits, and apparently Titan is just going to keep on drinking water for a good solid 2 minutes. He must be a very thirsty dog, so I do apologize if that is annoying to anybody in the background. With that being said, my top start of the week is going to be Foster Moreau against the Seahawks. The Seahawks, they are allowing the most points per game to tight ends this year. They're giving up 13.4 points per game. That is the most in the NFL. With Foster Moreau, what you do like about it is outside of Mac Hollins, there's not that much competition for targets behind Davante Adams. Davante Adams is definitely going to get his, but maybe Pete Carroll might be the one that can figure out how you can double team Davante Adams. I don't know how teams don't do that consistently, especially when there's no Darren Waller or Hunter Renfrow to deal with that in the lineup. With that being said, I think Foster Moreau is a sneaky streaming play. He might be out there on the waivers for you still. I know I picked him off the waivers and I'm streaming him in one of my leagues this week. So if he's out there, you're looking to stream a tight end, I'll go grab Foster Moreau entering this week. My other start, this could be a name that you could play and watch on Thanksgiving, the first Thanksgiving game tomorrow. Dawson Knox against the Lions. The Lions are allowing 10.2 points per game to tight ends this year. That's the third most in the NFL. Dawson Knox, you know, he's one of those tight ends where he's either his bottom floor or he gets you a high game. Well, the matchup says it's right there. I feel like he hasn't had a big game in like 2 or 3 weeks. I could be wrong. But I feel like he's due for one. The matchup's there. If you got him, I would put him in your lineups this week. And plus, it gives you, a player to watch on Thanksgiving and cheer for. And I will say this too, guys. There's only 3 teams giving up over 10 points per game. It's these 2 teams, the Seahawks and Lions. And then you guys should know, if you've been listening to me all season, the Cardinals. Gerald Everett didn't miss the last game, so that's why I didn't want to mention him. But do watch Gerald Everett's injury throughout the week, and if he's available, that's a decent name to stream as well. Just to put that out there, because you guys know I love to talk about how tight ends just have great games against the Cardinals. Let's go ahead and move on to the sits, though. Speaking of a tight end that had a great game against the Cardinals, George Kittle. George Kittle against the 49ers. Now, he's a temper your expectation play. I would never, sit George Kittle. I know his season, he hasn't been as consistent as he has in the past, but he's always on the field. He's in a dynamic offense. But maybe if you do have an option to stream another tight end, I would consider it. But he's definitely a guy I'm going to avoid on any of my DFS lineups this week because he's going against the Saints. I typed this up wrong, so if I did say the 49ers, that's totally on me. That's totally on me. But yeah, George Kittle against the Saints. Saints are only giving up 4 points per game. That is the fewest amount in the NFL. They got Demario Davis in the middle of that defense, so he does help out in coverage and actually does do a good job at blitzing the quarterback. But with that being said, when you look at the fantasy matchup, the Titans are just not having success against New Orleans this year. And then my other sit, he's been a streaming tight end this year, so you may want to go back to him if he gave you success earlier in the year, because they are facing one of the badder defenses, one of the worst defenses in the NFL and in the Bears. But when you look at fantasy, the Bears are giving up 5.1 points per game to tight ends. That's the sixth fewest across the NFL. So again, if maybe Conklin had you a big game earlier in the season, you need a tight end. You just lost Kyle Pitts and you see him out on the market. That's a guy I would not pick up to stream this week. So again, my top starts, Foster Moreau against the Seahawks and Dawson Knox against the Lions. And my sits, George Kittle against the Saints and Tyler Conklin against the Bears. So yeah, that is this week's edition of the starts and sits for week 12 of the NFL season. As always, guys, if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please hit the subscribe button so we can continue to build that number up. And then as always, if there are any names that I did not talk about you want to hear my opinion on, feel free to either, get in my comment section. I'll reply to your comments. If you guys follow me on any of my social media platforms at Cody Talks NFL, you can shoot me a DM. I always say if you got my number, you can shoot me a text. And then with it being Thanksgiving, I do want to show some gratitude. So I do want to be thankful to anybody that has been watching my videos throughout the season. If you're a first-time listener, I really appreciate you watching this. And I hope you come back for more of my content that I do produce. I want to be thankful for my family out there, my friends, my dog Titan, even though he makes that appearance in the video every once in a while. And then I just want to appreciate everybody that has been interacting with me throughout the NFL season. With that being said, next time you'll see me is next Tuesday when I do the waiver wires and streamable defenses. I hope you guys enjoy your Thanksgiving tomorrow. I'll talk to you then. Peace out. I'll talk to you later.